It was a quiet night in the Thompson household. The clock on the wall showed 2:13 a.m. The house was dark, except for the soft glow of a nightlight in the nursery. Outside, the wind rustled the trees, and the occasional hoot of an owl broke the silence. In the nursery, baby Noah slept peacefully in his crib. His tiny chest rose and fell as he breathed. His favorite stuffed bear lay beside him, and a cozy blue blanket covered his little body. Everything seemed perfect until Max, the family's golden retriever, started barking. At first, the barking was low and soft, like a warning. Woof, woof. Max stood near the nursery door, his ears up, his eyes focused. Then, his barking grew louder. Woo-o-o-f. Woo-o-f? He scratched at the door, his tail stiff, his body tense. In the next room, Noah's parents, Emily and Jake, woke up with a start. Emily groaned, turning to Jake. Max again. She mumbled sleepily. Jake sighed and rubbed his eyes. Yeah, I don't know what's gotten into him lately. For the past few nights, Max had been acting strangely. He never used to bark at night, but now, almost every night, he would stand outside the nursery and bark. They thought maybe he was just being protective, but tonight, something felt different. Jake threw off the covers and got up. I'll check, he said, walking toward the door. Max's barking grew louder as Jake approached. The dog wasn't just barking, he was growling too. His teeth were slightly bared, and his eyes stayed locked on the nursery door. Max, quiet, Jake whispered firmly, but Max didn't listen. Instead, he growled even louder and scratched at the door more aggressively. Emily sat up in bed, now fully awake. Maybe something's wrong with Noah, she said, worry creeping into her voice. Jake's heart started pounding. Without another word, he quickly opened the nursery door. The moment he did, Max rushed inside, sniffing the air wildly. His body was stiff, and he let out a deep growl. Jake turned on the small lamp near the crib. The soft, warm light filled the room. Everything looked normal. Noah was still sleeping peacefully. The room was clean, the windows were shut, and nothing seemed out of place. Jake sighed in relief. Max, there's nothing here, he said, shaking his head. He knelt beside the dog and gently rubbed his back. It's okay, boy. Go back to sleep. Max didn't move. His ears were still up, his nose twitching as he sniffed near Noah's crib. Then he let out another low growl and took a step forward. Emily appeared at the door, her face filled with concern. What if Max is sensing something we can't see? She asked. Jake frowned. Like what? Emily didn't know the answer, but deep down she felt uneasy. Max had never acted this way before. Then she remembered something. Wait, we installed the baby cam last week, right? Jake's eyes widened. Yes, let's check the footage. They hurried back to their bedroom, with Max following closely behind. Jake grabbed his phone from the nightstand and opened the baby monitor app. The screen flickered as the live video appeared. Emily and Jake stared at the screen, their eyes narrowing. At first, everything looked normal, just a sleeping baby, a quiet nursery. Then, something moved. Emily gasped, covering her mouth. Jake's hand tightened around the phone. Max let out another low growl. Something was in the room with their baby. Emily and Jake froze. Their eyes were locked on the baby monitor screen. The nursery looked the same as before, soft lighting, a peaceful baby, and nothing out of place. But then it happened again, a small movement near Noah's crib. Emily's heart pounded. Did you see that? She whispered. Jake nodded slowly. His fingers gripped the phone tighter. Yeah, but what was it? Max let out another low growl, his body tense. He sat next to them on the bed, eyes fixed on the screen, as if he understood something they didn't. Emily swallowed hard. Rewind the footage, she said. Let's see what happened before Max started barking. Jake's hands were shaky as he scrolled back in the video. He rewound about 15 minutes, just before Max had woken them up. The screen showed Noah sleeping soundly, the soft rise and fall of his little chest. The crib was still, the room quiet. Nothing seemed strange. Then suddenly, Noah shifted in his sleep. His tiny hands twitched, his head moved slightly. Nothing unusual. But then the movement appeared again. This time it wasn't no. Something small, dark, and quick moved near his blanket. Emily's breath caught in her throat. What is that? She asked in a shaky voice. Jake leaned closer to the screen. His pulse was racing. He rewound again, playing it slower. This time, they saw it clearly. A shadow moved near Noah's tiny feet, a long, slithering shadow. Emily gasped. Jake, oh my God, that's a snake. Jake's voice was barely a whisper, but the word hung in the air like a heavy weight. Emily's hands shot up to her mouth. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. No, he's in there. Before she could finish, Jake was already moving. He jumped out of bed and ran toward the nursery. Max barked and followed right behind him. Emily scrambled to her feet, her legs shaking as she ran after them. Jake burst into the nursery and flicked on the lights. His eyes darted to the crib. Noah was still sleeping, his little chest rising and falling, completely unaware of the danger. Max rushed to the crib, growling deep in his throat. His body was tense, his ears pinned back. He was ready to protect his little human. Emily stood frozen at the doorway, her breath caught in her chest. She didn't dare move. Jake took a cautious step forward. His eyes scanned the crib, looking for the snake. It was small, but not too small. It was curled up near the edge of Noah's blanket, almost hidden in the folds. For a moment, everything was silent. Then, in one swift motion, the snake moved. It slithered fast and smooth, heading toward Noah's tiny legs. Emily screamed, "No." But before she could move, Max did. With lightning speed, the golden retriever lunged forward. His jaws snapped around the snake just inches away from Noah's foot. A sharp hiss filled the air as the snake writhed in Max's mouth. Jake didn't hesitate. He grabbed Noah and lifted him from the crib, holding him close to his chest. The baby stirred but didn't wake up. Max ran out of the nursery, still holding the snake tightly in his jaws. His growls rumbled deep in his chest as he dashed toward the living room. Emily clutched her heart, her body trembling. "Is Noah okay?" she asked, her voice shaking. Jake nodded, checking their son's tiny feet and legs. "He's fine. Thank God." They heard a loud thump from the other room. Max had thrown the snake onto the floor. Jake handed Noah to Emily. "Stay here," he said, his voice firm. "I'll take care of this." She held their baby tightly as Jake rushed out of the room. Emily looked down at Noah, tears welling in her eyes. He was safe, because of Max. Her hand shook as she kissed her baby's forehead. Then she whispered, "Good boy, Max." But the night wasn't over yet, because now they had to see if the snake was still alive. Emily held Noah tightly against her chest, her heart still pounding. She could hear Max growling in the other room, his deep, protective sound echoing through the house. Jake ran out of the nursery, following the sound of Max barking. Emily wanted to go after them, but she knew she had to stay with Noah. Her hands were still shaking as she gently rocked her baby, whispering soft words even though he was still asleep. In the living room, Max stood over the snake, his body low to the ground, ready to attack again if needed. The snake twitched slightly, but it wasn't moving much. Jake grabbed a broom from the corner of the room, his eyes locked on the creature that had nearly harmed his son. Max let out another growl, but Jake reached down and gently placed a hand on the dog's back. "It's okay, boy," he said softly. "You did good." Carefully, Jake used the broom to push the snake away from Max. He didn't know if it was dead or just stunned, but he wasn't taking any chances. He quickly grabbed a bucket and flipped it over the snake, trapping it underneath. His hands were still shaking. He let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Emily appeared in the doorway, her face pale. "Is it gone?" she asked hesitantly. Jake nodded. "It's trapped. I'll take it outside." She held Noah close, her eyes brimming with emotion. "Max saved him," she whispered. Jake looked at their loyal golden retriever, who was still standing guard near the bucket. His fur was slightly ruffled, his chest rising and falling as he panted. But his eyes never left the snake, making sure it was no longer a threat. "He knew," Jake said, his voice filled with awe. "He knew something was wrong." Emily's throat tightened with emotion. She had always loved Max, but now, looking at him, she realized he wasn't just their pet. He was their protector. Jake grabbed a thick pair of gloves from the cabinet and carefully slid a piece of cardboard under the bucket. He carried it outside, walking far to the edge of their yard. Then he tipped the bucket over, letting the snake slide onto the grass. It twitched slightly before slithering away into the darkness. Jake stood there for a moment, breathing heavily. He had never been more scared in his life. When he walked back inside, Emily was sitting on the couch, cradling Noah. Max was lying beside her, his head resting on her lap. She was running her fingers through his soft fur, her expression full of gratitude. Jake sat down next to them, wrapping an arm around his wife and son. "That was too close," he murmured. Emily nodded, looking down at Max. "He saved our baby, Jake." Jake reached out and stroked Max's head. "You're a hero, buddy," he said softly. Max lifted his head slightly and licked Jake's hand, his tail wagging just a little. Emily let out a shaky laugh. "I can't believe we didn't trust him before. He was trying to warn us, and we kept telling him to be quiet." Jake sighed. "Yeah, we should have listened." For a few moments, they just sat there in silence, holding each other close. The fear was still there, but more than anything, they felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Finally, Emily wiped her eyes. "We have to tell people about this," she said. "People need to know how amazing Max is." Jake nodded. "Let's check the footage again. The whole thing might be on camera." They didn't know it yet, but their story was about to spread far beyond their home. Max's bravery would soon touch the hearts of millions. But for now, they simply sat together, thankful for the dog who had always been more than just a pet. He was family. The house was finally quiet again, but Emily and Jake were still wide awake. The fear from what had just happened still sat heavy in their chests. Noah was safe, sleeping soundly in Emily's arms. Max lay beside them on the couch, his golden fur warm and comforting. His eyes were half closed, but he was still alert, his ears twitching at every small sound. Jake picked up his phone and opened the baby monitor app again. "We should check the footage," he said. "I want to see exactly how Max knew." Emily nodded, tightening her grip on Noah. "If we had ignored him," she whispered, but she couldn't finish the sentence. The thought was too terrifying. Jake rewound the video, going back to an hour before Max started barking. The screen showed the nursery in soft night vision. Noah was peacefully asleep in his crib. Everything seemed normal. Then, as they watched closely, they saw it. A small shadow appeared at the edge of the crib. Emily's breath caught. Oh my God, it was already there. Jake's jaw tightened as he watched. The snake had slithered slowly along the crib's edge, moving so quietly that it didn't disturb Noah at all. It curled up near his tiny feet, almost blending into the blanket. Then Max appeared on the video. At first, he just stood at the nursery door, staring into the room. His ears were up, his body stiff. He had sensed something before even seeing it. Then, as if realizing the danger, he began to bark. They watched as Max scratched at the door, growled, and barked louder, but the snake still didn't move. Noah stirred in his sleep, but he remained unaware of the danger right beside him. Then suddenly, Max made a decision. In the video, they saw him push the door open with his nose and rush inside. He stopped beside the crib, his body tense, his eyes locked onto the snake. Then something incredible happened. Instead of jumping right away, Max lowered his head and sniffed near the crib. It was as if he was thinking, trying to figure out the safest way to act. He let out a deep growl, his tail stiff and straight. That's when the snake moved. On the screen, the shadowy shape slithered slowly toward Noah's foot. It was only inches away when Max lunged forward. Emily gasped as she watched Max grab the snake midair, just before it touched their baby. The snake writhed in his jaws, but Max didn't let go. He turned and ran out of the room, just like they had seen earlier. Jake paused the video, his hands shaking. He knew, Emily whispered, her eyes brimming with tears. He knew the whole time. Jake let out a deep breath and rubbed his face. He didn't just react, he thought about what to do. Emily reached down and gently stroked Max's fur. He lifted his head and licked her hand, his eyes soft and loving. You saved him, Max, she said, her voice full of emotion. You saved our baby. Jake exhaled sharply and shook his head. We have to share this, he said. People need to see what he did. Emily hesitated. You think people will care? Jake turned his phone toward her. Are you kidding? This is incredible. It's not just a story about a dog barking at night. It's about a hero who saved a life. Emily looked down at Max again, her heart swelling with love. She knew Jake was right. Tomorrow, the world would hear about Max, and they would never look at him the same way again. The next morning, Emily sat at the kitchen table, her fingers hovering over her phone. She had barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the video again. Max barking, the snake moving, the moment their brave dog saved Noah. Max sat beside her chair, his golden fur warm against her legs. He looked up at her with calm, loving eyes, as if he knew everything was okay now. Jake walked in, holding Noah in his arms. The baby was awake, giggling softly, completely unaware of how close he had been to danger just hours ago. Did you post it? Jake asked, setting Noah in his high chair. Emily hesitated. I don't know. I mean, it's personal. Do you really think people will care? Jake sat down across from her. Emily, this isn't just a normal story. This is a real-life hero moment. Max didn't just bark. He saved our baby. I think people would want to see that. Emily looked at Max and smiled. Okay, she said. She opened the video editing app and clipped the footage down to the most important parts. The snake appearing, Max barking, and the incredible moment when he jumped in to save Noah. She added a caption. Our dog wouldn't stop barking at our baby's crib. Then we checked the camera. Max is a hero. With a deep breath, she pressed upload. The internet reacts. At first, nothing happened. Emily and Jake went about their morning as usual, feeding Noah, playing with him, and giving Max extra treats and belly rubs. But then, about an hour later, Emily's phone buzzed. One new comment. Then another. Then 10. Then 100. Emily's eyes widened. Jake, look at this. Jake leaned over as Emily scrolled through the comments. OMG, this gave me chills. Max is a real hero. Dogs are so much smarter than we give them credit for. I'm crying. Thank you for sharing this amazing story. Views were climbing fast. Within 2 hours, the video had 50,000 views. By lunchtime, it had crossed 200,000. Emily's hands were shaking. This is crazy, she whispered. Jake grinned. I told you people would care. That afternoon, a reporter from a local news station sent them a message. Hi, Emily, we saw your video and would love to interview you and your family, including Max. Please let us know if you're interested. Emily read the message twice, then looked at Jake. They want to put Max on the news. Jake laughed. Looks like our boy is about to be famous. Max wagged his tail, completely unaware of the attention he was getting. To him, all that mattered was that his family was safe. A hero's recognition. That evening, the news station aired the story. The anchor described the terrifying moment the snake slithered near Noah's crib, showing the video footage. When they replayed the part where Max jumped in to save Noah, the anchor smiled and said, If this isn't proof that dogs are man's best friend, I don't know what is. Emily and Jake sat on the couch, watching in amazement. The next morning, their story was everywhere. Bigger news channels picked it up, and Max's heroic acts spread across social media. People sent messages from all over the world, praising Max's bravery. A well-known pet brand even reached out, offering to send Max a Hero Dog Award, along with a lifetime supply of treats. Jake laughed as he read the email. Max, buddy, looks like you hit the jackpot. Max, lying on the floor with his belly up, simply wagged his tail. Emily bent down and kissed his head. You deserve it, boy. But for Max, it wasn't about fame or treats or awards. All he had ever wanted was to keep his family safe. And that's exactly what he had done. The next few days were like a dream. Everywhere Emily and Jake went, people recognized them. Neighbors stopped them at the grocery store, saying, We saw Max on the news. What an amazing dog. Even strangers messaged them online, thanking them for sharing the story. But through it all, Max stayed the same. He still followed Emily around the house, still lay near Noah's crib every night, and still wagged his tail whenever Jake called him a good boy. One morning, a special package arrived at their doorstep. A large box with a bright red ribbon. Emily looked at Jake in confusion. "Did you order something?" Jake shook his head. "No. Let's open it." Inside was a beautiful gold medal with the words Hero Dog Award engraved on it. Next to it was a letter from the pet brand that had contacted them. "Dear Max, you are a true hero. Your bravery has inspired people all over the world. As a small thank you, we are sending you a lifetime supply of treats and toys. Enjoy." Emily felt tears welling up as she looked at Max. He was sniffing the box, his tail wagging excitedly. Jake laughed. "Well, buddy, looks like you're famous now." They placed the medal around Max's neck, and Emily took a picture. She posted it online with the caption, "Our hero dog, Max, got his well-deserved award. He's still the same loving pup, just with a little extra shine now." Within minutes, thousands of people liked and shared the post. A special visit. That afternoon, there was a knock on the door. When Emily opened it, a man in a uniform stood outside. He had a badge that read Animal Rescue Foundation. "Hi, are you Max's family?" he asked with a warm smile. Emily nodded. "Yes, we are. I'm Officer Daniels. We work with rescue dogs and train them for special services. We heard about Max and we wanted to meet him." Jake stepped forward. "Is everything okay?" Officer Daniels chuckled. "Oh yes, more than okay. We wanted to see if Max would be interested in becoming an honorary rescue dog. We train dogs like him to help in search and rescue missions, therapy visits, and even emotional support programs." Emily's eyes widened. "You mean Max could help other people too?" "That's right," Officer Daniels said. "His instincts and loyalty make him a perfect candidate. Of course, it's up to you. He would still live here with you, but he'd also get special training." Emily and Jake looked at Max, who was sitting between them, his big brown eyes full of love. Jake smiled. "What do you think, buddy? Want to be a real-life hero?" Max tilted his head, then let out a happy bark, his tail wagging. Emily laughed. "I think that's a yes. More than just a dog." Over the next few months, Max went through special training. He learned how to sense danger, how to comfort people in need, and even how to assist rescue teams. But no matter how much he trained, he never changed. He was still the same loving dog who cuddled with Noah, wagged his tail whenever Emily walked into the room, and looked at Jake like he was his best friend in the world. And though he became known as a hero, Max never cared about fame. All he ever wanted was to protect the people he loved. And for that, he would always be a hero, not just to the world, but to the family who would forever be grateful for the night he saved their baby. Months passed, but Max remained the heart of the family. He had always been loving and loyal, but now, after his training, he seemed even more confident, like he knew he had a special purpose. His days were still filled with cuddles, belly rubs, and playing with Noah. But every now and then, he went on special missions with Officer Daniels and his team. One crisp autumn morning, Max sat by the door, his ears perked up. He had sensed something. He always knew when it was time for work. Jake clicked on his leash. "You ready, buddy?" Max let out a happy bark. Emily smiled as she picked up Noah. "Be careful," she said. "Come back soon, hero." Jake kissed her cheek and ruffled Noah's soft hair. "We'll be back before you know it." Then they headed out. The rescue mission. That day, Max was joining a search and rescue drill. The team was training in the woods, preparing for real emergencies. It was only practice, but Max took it seriously. Officer Daniels explained the mission. A volunteer is hiding somewhere in the woods. It's Max's job to find them. Jake knelt beside Max. "All right, buddy. Let's do this." Max sniffed the air, his ears twitching. He looked at Jake, then took off into the trees. His paws moved swiftly over the leaves, his nose leading the way. Jake followed close behind, his heart pounding. He trusted Max completely. Minutes passed. Max zigzagged through the trees, sniffing carefully. Then suddenly he stopped. His body tensed, his ears perked up. He had found something. With a sharp bark, Max ran toward a fallen tree. Behind it, the volunteer was lying still, pretending to be lost. Max nudged their arm, then let out another loud bark. Officer Daniels and the team arrived seconds later. "Good job, Max," he said, patting the dog's head. "You found them fast." Jake grinned. "I think he was born for this." Everyone laughed, and Max wagged his tail proudly. A special recognition. After the training, the team gathered to celebrate. Max had performed so well that the rescue team decided to give him a special badge, one that made him an official honorary search and rescue dog. Officer Daniels pinned the badge to Max's collar. "Congratulations, Max. You're now part of the team." Jake clapped his hands. "That's my boy." Max barked happily, his tail wagging like crazy. Coming home. That evening, when Jake and Max returned home, Emily was waiting at the door. "How did it go?" she asked, smiling. Jake crouched down beside Max and held up his new badge. "Our boy is officially a search and rescue hero." Emily's eyes softened. "Max, we are so proud of you." Noah, who had just started to crawl, giggled and reached for Max. The golden retriever laid down beside him, letting the baby grab his fur. Emily sighed, feeling warmth spread through her heart. Max had saved them once before. Now he was helping save others too. But no matter how many lives he touched, he would always be their hero first. And that was all that mattered. Years passed, but Max remained the heart of the family. He was more than just a pet. He was a protector, a best friend, and a true hero. Noah grew up with Max always by his side. From crawling to taking his first steps, from learning to ride a bike to starting school, Max was there for it all. Whenever Noah fell, Max was the first to nuzzle him, offering silent comfort. Whenever Noah laughed, Max's tail wagged with joy. But as Noah grew older, Max grew older too. His golden fur turned lighter around his face, and his steps became slower. He no longer ran as fast as he used to, and his once loud barks became softer. Emily and Jake knew Max was aging, but they made sure he was happy. They gave him his favorite treats, let him rest on the softest blankets, and took him on slow, peaceful walks in the park. And through it all, Max still watched over his family, just like he always had. One last mission. One quiet evening, as the sun set outside, Noah sat beside Max on the living room floor. "You're the best dog in the world," Noah whispered, gently hugging him. Max rested his head on Noah's lap, his eyes full of love. Jake and Emily sat nearby, watching with warm smiles. They knew Max's time with them was precious, and they cherished every moment. That night, as the family slept, Max slowly made his way to Noah's room, just like he had done every night since the day Noah was born. He curled up beside the bed, letting out a deep, content sigh. And as he closed his eyes, his heart was full. He had done his job. His family was safe, and that was all that ever mattered. A hero remembered. The next morning, the house felt different. Max had peacefully passed away in his sleep, surrounded by love. Tears filled Emily's eyes as she gently stroked his fur. Jake placed a hand on her shoulder, his own eyes glassy. Noah, now older but still just a child, looked at Max and whispered, "Thank you for protecting me." It was a heartbreaking day, but they knew Max's love would never leave them. His paws had left prints not just on their floors, but on their hearts forever. A lasting legacy. In the weeks that followed, people from all over sent messages, sharing how Max had inspired them. Officer Daniels and the rescue team planted a tree in the park in his honor, with a plaque that read, "Max, a true hero, a loyal friend." And at home, Noah kept Max's hero badge on his nightstand, right beside a framed picture of the two of them together. One evening, as the sun set, Noah sat by the window, looking at the sky. "I miss you, Max," he whispered. Just then, a gentle breeze passed through the room. It was warm, comforting, like a soft nuzzle from an old friend. Noah smiled. Max was still watching over them, and he always would.